Siva Valley, our home. Honor. Tradition.
Hi there.
Hey there.
Shadow dancing. Our way of life.
Ah, hello.
But freedom doesn't come free.
No! Sweet Callahan! No!
Look familiar? Scenes like these are happening all over Siva. You could be next. That is, unless you make the most important decision of your life. Prove to yourself that you have the strength and the courage to be free. Join the Wardens.
Troops, I saw a barrier. Today, we're taking a look at Update 56 for Foxhole. This update features a Warden frigate, a Colonial open-top submarine, plenty of server improvements, and a lot of changes coming to facilities. So let's dive right in. Some map changes include, at minimum zoom, you can actually see the entire world map now. Rocks below all seaports have been removed from all regions. I assume this is to help with clipping issues. In Alad's Bight, an anti-climbing pass was undertaken. In Callum's Cape, an anti-climbing pass was also undertaken. In the Clashta, the Watchful Knave, Relic Base has been converted into a town. In Faranac Coast, a road surface was added between Terra and the Mirror. In King's Cage, the Bailey Relic Base has been converted into a town. In Marban Hollow, redid the Lugbone Dam Bridge staircase. In the Moors, removed the Legacy Snow VFX. In Nevish Line, an anti-climbing pass was undertaken. In Origin, a natural ramp was added to the observation tower west of Arise. And in Tempest Island, the road leading to the Iris Seaport has been adjusted. For the following demonstrations, please keep your eye on these left and right mouse button prompts. They'll help you understand what's going on. Automatic fire now resumes once it becomes valid to do so while the fire button is held down. So you know that feeling in Foxhole when you're firing your machine gun but you turn your aim a little bit too far quickly to the right and then your machine gun stops firing and you have to unclick and then re-click your left mouse button? Well, no more. As long as your left mouse button is held down, you will fire your weapon as long as your weapon is within its firing arc. But you can start holding your left mouse button from any point. If your weapon's blocked by a doorway, or if you're very slowly turning your machine gun and waiting for it to catch up to your aiming point, you can still hold down the left mouse button even if you can't fire, and then once your character turns towards that direction enough, then they will start firing. This means you can queue up your shots if you're, say, turning to face an enemy that's charging you down. The next weapon change is towards attachments. Attachments, such as the rifle grenade launcher or the bayonet, will now stay equipped on a weapon, whether it's holstered or not. Don't have to unequip and re-equip your bayonet every time you change weapons. There's also an icon in the inventory menu now that shows if a weapon has an attachment on it. This is a great quality of life change, and also leads to a few more interesting tactics that have been introduced. For example, if you attach your bayonet before hopping into a vehicle, well, when you hop out of the vehicle and pull out your weapon, the bayonet will already be attached, ready to be a stabbing. However, if you have an attachment on a weapon and you are killed, you will have to pick up those two items separately from the dead player's inventory. Another series of changes comes to voice chat. Now, in the voice options menu, there are sliders for your output volume, local volume, squad volume, and your input volume all together. So you can modify whether you want your squad mates to be louder than the crowd in proximity chat or vice versa. Additionally, there's also some new hotkeys to toggle on different voice chat settings. Pressing U will enable or disable voice chat altogether. Pressing the I key by default will mute local chat. You can mute squad chat by pressing O by default. And the voice chat messages will include which button to press in order to unmute or remute the voice chats, just in case you forget the keys. Enemy vehicles and structures can now be repaired. However, the word enemy will appear in the repair message, just to make sure you know whose vehicles and buildings you're repairing. While we're on the subject of enemy vehicles, you can no longer lock unoccupied enemy vehicles. Now that sounds like a massive debuff to partisans, but remember, all you have to do is enter the vehicle's driver's seat and then you can lock it. I think mainly this is to deal with the annoyance of enemies running up to field machine guns from the front and locking them without having to even get around to the backside of them. You know, risk versus reward kind of thing. Next up, some major changes are coming to the productions in facilities. When it comes to production orders, facilities now allow up to 5 players to start production orders that will run simultaneously and consume no additional power for each additional order, essentially giving facilities 5 times the production for the same amount of power. These orders can be set to public or personal, just like in factories or refineries. If set to public, any resource within the structure stockpile will be used for the production order. However, if it's set to personal, each player will have their own output slot for each recipe, allowing items to be stored securely whilst the production is underway. If these items are not claimed within 28 hours, they're released to the public stockpile. Be sure in the middle menu to set the tab to private or public, and if you're doing a private order, make sure you submit the resources to the center menu, not to the stockpile, in order to start producing. Facility products can also now be retrieved as reservable crates and stored in reserve stockpiles. If there are more than 5 production orders at a structure, a queue will then be formed. The power cost is set by the order with the highest power cost in that structure, and the maximum throughput of liquids and pipes has been increased to accommodate for potential increased liquid consumptions per building. Overall, the devs have explained that the goal with these changes is to A. increase the amount of overall production potential at facilities, and B. open up more segments of facilities to public or to non-regiment affiliated players, allowing them to do more than just mine resources in order to help. Now they can be reasonably entrusted with producing items at facilities if they are given the task to do so. When it comes to power, power plants will now consume fewer resources when the supply of power is greater than the demand. So if your production is not at full capacity, your power sources won't waste as many resources. Facilities as a whole also no longer completely shut off when the power demand exceeds the power supply, unless the power supply is less than 10% of the total demand. So just as an example, let's say you have 2 ammo factories in a facility that are running at full production, but you've only got enough power to fully supply one. You can run both of these ammo facilities and have them produce items, but since you're exceeding the total amount of power available, they'll produce at a much slower rate, but they will produce those items. Similarly, the BMS Foreman Stacker, the crane, will reduce to a standard reduced rotation speed when the power demand cannot be met. And the facility power UI has been adjusted to more clearly communicate power supply and demand on a network. Oh, and also, the resources produced by the sulfuric reactor modification for the power station is also scaled down. For assembly stations, squad reserve assembly stations no longer reserve all produced vehicles to the station's squad. When starting a production order, a prompt will appear asking the player if they would like to reserve the vehicle to their squad. Though, note that this is just a regular squad reservation and it will be wrenchable after the standard grace period. Liquid and resource transfer stockpiles no longer restrict access when squad reserved. Pipes can now be configured to only accept one type of liquid by the original builder or a squad member if the pipe is reserved. Oil wells and piped water pumps have had their additional recipes removed as they're no longer needed under the production order system. Oil refinery water, oil, and heavy oil capacity has increased from 1,000 to 5,000 liters. Metalwork factory water heavy oil and enriched oil capacity has increased from 1,000 to 5,000 liters. Coal refinery water capacity has increased from 1,000 to 5,000 liters. Fuel silo capacity increased from 500 to 5,000 liters. Material factory petrol capacity increased from 1,000 to 5,000 liters. Liquid transfer station capacity has increased from 400 to 500. The resource transfer station capacity has increased from 12,000 to 15,000. Multiple facility structures are now reserved if the structure shares a foundation island. The cost of facility modifications are also refunded alongside the base structure cost when a structure is demolished. And materials produced at facilities can now be packaged into crates at storage depots, seaports, and within containers. The facility structure destroy timer has increased from various values to a standard 4 weeks. This does exclude railway tracks and provisional roads, however. And as a slight side note to facility gameplay, the sub-region modifier for maintenance supplies has been removed. This coincides with the updated server changes and infrastructure the devs have implemented to make the game more stable. Now, we can handle this, hopefully.
We want to thank I Saw a Bear for his gift to us to remind us of the server hamster holding everything together. So thank you, I Saw a Bear.
A few other related changes for facilities are that shipping containers and resource containers can now be readily interacted with when stacked on top of each other, up to 3 containers tall. Shippables that are packaged now show their name followed by parentheses packaged. Colors can now be applied to liquid containers and resource containers, similar to the shipping containers. All shippable structures produced at facilities now have a prototype visual when under construction. The Field Modification Center cost has been reduced from 250 down to 150 process construction materials. The upgrade cost for most vehicles at Field Modification Centers has been reduced by 33%, with the following exceptions. The AU A150 Taurine Rigger and the Canute Cliff Rest, basically the heavy trucks. Process construction materials cost from 120 to 0. Construction material costs from 0 to 150 for both of these trucks. The BMS Overseer Skyhauler has been moved from facilities at Tier 3 to facilities at Tier 2. Crane Railway Tracks moved from facilities of Tier 3 down to facilities of Tier 2, and the cost has been changed from 3 steel construction materials to 25 process construction materials. Stockpile category tabs are hidden if a structure cannot hold anything within a certain stockpile category. And a region event log was added for demolishing structures. Let's talk about some new ships. First up is the Warden Black Steel class frigate. It has 2 120mm turrets, 2 68mm turrets at the front, 2 12.7mm machine guns on its sides, and 1 quad-barrel depth charge launcher at its bow, and operates best with a crew of 10 or more sailors. Its armaments are pretty similar to all the other ships that we've seen in the previous update. The 2 68mm cannons at the front are a little awkward as you have to walk around the outside of the ship to get to their entrance doors. Quad barrel depth charge launcher is pretty handy since you get 4 shots before having to reload. It's got a sonar station at the front, just like the Colonial destroyer. Its engine bay is in the center if you need to shift gears. Its main ammo hold is at the rear, along with both its 120mm turrets. And its central stockpile and spawn points are at the front or bow of the ship. And just like most ships, its pilot and spotter seat are at the top of the stairs towards the front of the vessel. A good all-around sub-hunter, if a little cramped, though its small size might lend to its speed and maneuverability.
That would be the sub.
Oh my god, that thing is huge. And what will it be hunting? Well, it's going to be hunting the new Colonial submarine, the Trident class submarine. It's got an armament of 2 torpedo tubes, a 120mm artillery deck gun, and a special ammo bay hatch. Its 120mm deck gun has the ability to fire as an artillery piece, and swivels from side to side a decent amount. At the front of the submarine, you'll find its forward ballast, along with its 2 torpedo tubes and torpedo ammo storage racks, carrying a total of 8 torpedoes plus 2 loaded in the tube. Here you'll also find the hatch switch and the torpedo loader stations. In the room just behind it, you'll find its storage racks, as well as the operating room for the 120mm. In the room past that, it's its main control center. You'll have the middle ballast controls, pilot seat, the dive officer, the sonar station, and the periscope station. And in the room just behind that, you'll have the safety ballast and the engines. And as the devs cheekily put in, this is in fact an open-top submarine. Its central bay hatch can open up, and ammo can be loaded directly into the submarine. You can technically put vehicles in there, however, the submarine cannot move if something is on the loading bay. So you'll be able to store vehicles in there, but you just won't be able to move them around. While we're talking torpedoes, torpedoes have seen several changes. The way torpedo racks are in submarines function a little bit differently. You can't carry extra torpedoes on your character now, you can't store them as large items, they are now palletized items. Dropping a pallet of torpedoes onto a dry dock gives you these inventory screens. If you select your submarine, you'll see that there's 2 different submarine stockpiles. These are the torpedo tubes. You'll have to load torpedoes up into each stockpile to fill them up, and then you'll see the torpedoes in the ship. To prime the torpedoes, take a wrench and wrench the torpedoes. That will load one into the tube, and then to push the tube forward and to flood it, you'll have to go to the weapon officer's console and press R to reload. It'll play this animation of it inserting the torpedo into the tube and flooding it. Then you're ready to fire. But on the receiving end of torpedoes, it's also changed quite a bit. Torpedoes now do specialized damage. The impact site of a torpedo will kill anyone within a small radius instantly. Torpedo holes are now considered as large holes or large leaks. These cannot be repaired with hammers. These need to be repaired with metal beams, and it will take quite a few just to keep the hole under control. It won't fully repair the hole though. Any hits from a submarine torpedo will force you to have to go back to dry dock and repair it using naval shell plating to repair the damage. This is going to make convoy escort essential to protect against submarines. Though, that being said, submarines are a more hit-and-run weapon now that their ammo capacity for torpedoes is a little bit more limited. Plus, while you're repairing at dry dock, you get to see the new animations and the new aesthetics of the dry dock. When you're repairing or building a ship in dry dock, it will actually drain water from the dry dock and fill it back up once the construction is complete. A nice touch. Note that moray torpedoes can no longer be stored in large ship ammo racks. However, metal beams can to make repairs easier and to limit the amount of torpedoes a sub can carry. The BMS Iron Ship now uses updated ship physics. Assembly times for items inside the BMS Bluefin stockpile have been reduced by 66%, and some visuals on the BMS Bluefin have been updated. Bridges can no longer be destroyed whilst a large ship is passing through it, but large ships will take damage when parked under bridges, similar to how the small ships behave. Though, that being said, the grace period for larger ships is longer than the small ships. Sounds produced by submarines that are submerged can no longer be heard by outside observers. Aiming with binoculars or from a spotter seat now zooms out the camera as the distance from the player increases. A new feature I didn't think was going to be added in this update is the ability to travel across the oceans. Every island region, so that's Stayma Landing, Fisherman's Row, Oarbreaker Isles on the west coast, Godscroft, Tempest Island, and the Fingers on the eastern seaboard, can now be used as travel points towards each other, meaning that navies on the eastern seaboard can become navies on the western seaboard in a flash, or at least once the preparations are complete. Do note that only gunboat or ships larger than a gunboat can travel across the oceans. You're not going to be making this journey in a motorboat, that's for sure. The following UI elements can now be closed by pressing the Use Key button, which by default is E. The upgrade menu for trenches and bunkers, tutorial signs, and structure event logs. Additionally, more UI elements can be closed by pressing the Escape key. Map posts, disbanding a regiment, squad creation prompts, reserve stockpile naming and passcode prompts, signpost editing prompts, and rocket platform code input prompts. Basically, all of these make it so you don't have to press the cancel button with your mouse. Additionally, pressing the build key, default is B, now closes the build menu, and pressing the map key, default M, now closes the map post creation prompt. Other assorted changes include the legacy camera mode was removed. Improved logic for choosing what mount to enter when there are overlapping vehicles or structures. Updated armored car collision models to be more accurate. The O'Brien Warsmith V215 roof vent texture has been updated. The Cullen Predator Mark III now has an underside similar to other tanks. A shard queue has been added to better distribute players into home regions during the start of wars. If you're disconnected from this queue for any reason, your spot will be reserved. There's been some streamlining with regards to region restart reconnection. Players will now be automatically reconnected when a server comes back online after a restart. Additional changes to make connections more durable against external network conditions when traveling between regions. Squad reservations on disbanded squads can be overridden by reserving for another squad. Likewise, squad reservations on disbanded squads are cleared when raising the anchor on a large ship. The options to respawn at the nearest home base or safe house now detect the nearest base from the spot the player died instead of the nearest base from the player's assigned respawn point. Some balance changes include the range for the sonar operator of the Naki submarine is measured from the center of the ship to be more consistent with larger ships. For the medics out there, critically wounded soldiers will now produce 5 instead of the previous 4 soldier supplies at hospitals, and there's been an increase in the chance that a critically wounded soldier will spawn. The MG ammo capacity on the Callahan class battleship has been increased to 150 rounds. Sea mines, Moray torpedoes, and Model 7 EV depth charges are no longer faction exclusive since both factions have submarines and frigates. The provisional road maintenance supply cost has been reduced from 3 to 2. The AB-11 Doru health has been increased from 1650 to 2000. The maximum amount of refined materials sorted from wreckage has been reduced slightly, although this is still higher than Update 54. The submarine periscope, operators can no longer always see ships regardless of depth, and the periscope depth has been set to about 10 meters. UV-5C Odyssey has had its health increase from 1150 to 1250, and an additional seat was added. The UV-05A Argonaut has had its inventory reduced from 7 down to 6 slots. The Drummond 100A and Drummond Spitfire 100D have had their disable thresholds reduced from 55 down to 40. All ships, excluding the BMS Grouper, are more resistant to anti-tank kinetic damage. The BMS Aquatipper, Iron Ship, Type C Charon, and 74B-1 Ronin gunships are less resistant to explosive and armor-piercing explosive damage. And the 86KA Bardiche and 86K-C Ransar acceleration have been improved. This update had a ton of bug fixes, but you'll be able to find those in the patch notes listed down below in the description. That about does it for this update. Thanks for tuning in. Again, if there's anything that was added last minute, or if there's any corrections I'll have to make, they will be in a pinned comment down below. I would just like to say a quick thank you to Pheobe, Versace, Dr. Broccoli, and Gremblo, whom you can check out on YouTube. I'll have his link down below for the intro, as well as the Sun Regiment for lending me their frigate, and anyone who came by and helped me on the Devbranch test or understand some of the mechanics. I couldn't have done it without you guys. So what do you guys in the comments down below think of this update? Do you like the changes that are coming to torpedoes? And which ship looks better, the destroyer or the frigate? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, Good luck, keep your heads down, and stay in your foxholes. Bear out.
Oh boy, I really sure am enjoying my time on this submarine. I'm glad there's nothing horrible that's ever gonna go wrong with it. You missed!